In 1978, a 23-year-old dropout figured out how to turn $1 into 400 billion. You've been working your entire life, and you'll never come close. The gap isn't luck, it's knowledge. Knowledge they have, and you don't. And today, that ends. Right now, while you're watching this, the wealth gap is accelerating at a rate never seen in human history. The top 1% controls more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. But here's what they don't tell you. This isn't an accident. This is architecture, a system designed with specific mechanisms that funnel money upward while keeping everyone else locked in place. Billionaires don't just have more money. They operate with a completely different set of rules. Rules you've never been taught. Rules that are deliberately hidden from public education, from media, from the conversations happening at your dinner table. This video will expose 5 mechanisms, 5 secrets that billionaires use to extract wealth from the economy while the majority fights over scraps. These aren't tips. These aren't mindset shifts. These are structural advantages built into the system itself. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Secret 1. They don't work for money. They own the systems that create it. Let's go back to 1976. A young man named Larry Ellison is working as a programmer in Silicon Valley. He's making decent money, but he notices something. The companies paying him thousands are making millions from the software he builds. He's trading time for money. They're trading a system for infinite returns. So Ellison stops working for paychecks. He builds Oracle. Not to have a job, but to own the infrastructure that every major corporation would eventually need. Today, Oracle's database systems run the back end of most of the world's largest companies. Ellison doesn't work in the system. He owns the system. And the system works for him 24 hours a day, in every country, in every time zone, whether he's awake or asleep. Here's the detail most people miss. When you work for money, you get paid once for your time. When you own the system, you get paid every time anyone uses that system. It's the difference between being a mechanic at Ford and being Henry Ford. The mechanic trades hours for wages. Ford owned the assembly line, the distribution network, the patents. One builds wealth linearly, the other builds wealth exponentially. The challenge is that most people never make this shift. They spend their entire lives optimizing how much they can earn per hour. Billionaires spend zero time on that question. They ask a different question entirely. What system can I own or control that generates value independent of my time? And here's the plot twist. The education system never teaches you this. From kindergarten through university, you're trained to be an employee, to trade time for money, to find your place within someone else's system. You're taught to write resumes, not business plans, to interview well, not to build infrastructure. The entire apparatus of modern education is designed to create workers, not owners. And that's not an accident. Think about how you feel right now. If you've spent years climbing a corporate ladder, working overtime, optimizing your salary negotiations, you've been solving the wrong problem. And the people who benefit from you solving the wrong problem are the ones who own the systems you're working within. Your entire life's effort has been making someone else exponentially wealthier. Secret 2. They use debt as a weapon while you're taught to fear it. 1983. A real estate developer named Donald Trump is drowning in debt. Not thousands, not millions. Nearly $1 billion. By every conventional measure, he should be destroyed. But here's what happens instead. He restructures, he leverages bank fear of total loss, he extracts better terms, and he builds an empire on top of that debt. The banks can't let him fail because they're in too deep. His debt becomes their problem. Now compare that to what you've been taught. Pay off your credit cards, avoid debt. Debt is dangerous, and for you, that advice is correct, because you've been taught to use debt the wrong way. Here are the details. When poor and middle-class people take on debt, they borrow money to buy things that lose value. Cars, consumer goods, lifestyle expenses. They pay interest on depreciating assets. The debt grows while the asset shrinks. It's a trap that tightens over time. When billionaires use debt, They borrow against appreciating assets to buy more appreciating assets. They use other people's money to control resources that generate cash flow. And here's the critical mechanism. The interest they pay on that debt is tax deductible. They're using pre-tax dollars to borrow, and the assets they buy generate income that's taxed at lower rates than your salary. Let's be specific. A billionaire borrows $100 million at 3% interest to buy an asset, generating 7% returns. The 4% spread is profit made entirely with someone else's money. And because the interest is deductible, the government effectively subsidizes this transaction. Meanwhile, you pay interest on a car loan with after-tax dollars, and the car loses 20% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. The challenge is that banks treat you and billionaires completely differently. You're a risk. They're a partner. You borrow money, and banks own you. Billionaires borrow money, and they own banks. The relationship is inverted based on scale. And the plot twist. The entire consumer economy is designed to train you to fear the type of debt that builds wealth while encouraging the type of debt that destroys it. Advertisements push you to finance depreciating goods. Credit card companies profit from your minimum payments. The mortgage industry sells you the largest debt of your life, calling it the American dream, while the home you're buying appreciates slower than inflation in most markets. You're conditioned to be a profitable debtor, not a strategic one. This should make you angry. Every financial literacy class you've ever taken taught you debt is bad, but that's only half the truth. The wrong debt is bad. The right debt is the most powerful wealth-building tool in existence, and you've been steered toward the wrong debt your entire life. Secret 3. They don't pay taxes, they write them. Here's a fact that should disturb you. In 2007, 2011, and 2018, Jeff Bezos paid 0 federal income taxes. 0. He's one of the wealthiest humans in history, and in those years he paid nothing. Meanwhile, you paid taxes on every dollar you earned. The backstory starts in 1913 with the creation of the U.S. federal income tax. It was sold to the public as a tax on the wealthy. The original rate only applied to the top 1%. But here's what happened. Over time, the tax burden shifted downward. Today, wage earners carry the heaviest relative tax burden, while the wealthiest pay the smallest percentage. How is this possible? The details are in the structure. Your income is salary. You get paid, the government takes its cut before you ever see the money, and you pay taxes on what's left. Billionaire income isn't salary, it's capital gains, stock options, carried interest, and asset appreciation, and those are taxed differently, or not taxed at all. Here's the mechanism. Bezos owns Amazon stock worth billions. That stock appreciates every year, but appreciation isn't income until you sell, so Bezos never sells. Instead, he borrows against his stock. Banks give him billions in loans using his shares as collateral. He spends that borrowed money, and because it's a loan, it's not taxable income. He lives a billionaire lifestyle on borrowed money and pays 0 income tax. When the loans come due, he borrows more. Or the stock pays dividends, or he sells a small amount at the capital gains rate, which is lower than your income tax rate. The system is designed so that asset owners pay fundamentally less than wage earners. But it goes deeper. Billionaires don't just use the tax code, they write it. Through lobbying, campaign contributions, and think tanks, they fund the politicians and policies that create these loopholes. Between 2000 and 2020, the financial industry alone spent more than $8 billion on political influence. That's not charity. That's investment. They spend millions to save billions. The challenge for you is that you have no seat at that table. You don't write tax policy. You don't fund the campaigns of legislators. You follow the rules that were written by people whose interests are the opposite of yours. And here's the plot twist that should keep you up at night. Every time there's talk of closing these loopholes, Billionaires fund media campaigns about how tax increases will hurt the middle class. They position themselves as job creators whose wealth trickles down. And the middle class fights to protect tax structures that only benefit the top. You've been convinced to defend the system that extracts from you. Think about April 15th. Think about how much you paid last year. Now think about someone worth $100 billion paying zero. The anger you feel isn't envy. It's the recognition of a rigged game. Secret 4. They control the creation of money itself. Let's go back to 1910. A secret meeting on Jekyll Island, Georgia. The most powerful bankers in America gather in private. No press, no government oversight. They draft the legislation that will become the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented history. The central banking system of the United States was designed in secret by private bankers. Here's why that matters. Most people think the government controls money. It doesn't. The Federal Reserve is a private institution. It's owned by member banks. When the government needs money, it doesn't print it. It borrows it from the Federal Reserve. The Fed creates money, loans it to the government at interest, and that interest is paid by taxpayers. You're paying interest to private banks for the creation of your own currency, but the real power is in what happens next. When the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates and pumps money into the economy, who gets it first? Not you. The money flows to banks and large financial institutions. They get access to cheap capital before it circulates through the economy. By the time that money reaches you, it's already been used to buy assets, and those assets have already gone up in price. This is called the Cantillon effect. Those closest to the creation of money benefit most. Those farthest from it suffer inflation without the compensating asset appreciation. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve has created trillions of dollars through quantitative easing. Stock markets have soared, real estate has exploded, but wages have been stagnant. If you don't own assets, you've been quietly robbed. Let's get specific. The challenge is that you can't opt out. You're paid in currency that's being devalued. Your savings lose purchasing power. And the only protection is owning assets, which requires capital most people don't have. Here's the plot twist. Every time there's an economic crisis, the solution is the same. Print more money, bail out banks, prop up asset prices. And every time, billionaires get richer and the middle class gets hollowed out. The 2008 financial crisis, the 2020 pandemic. The response is always to protect the wealth of those who own assets, not those who work for wages. You're told this is necessary for stability. What's really being stabilized is their position at the top. You should feel the weight of this. You've been working in a system where the money you earn is worth less every year, and the people at the top are creating the conditions that devalue it. Your labor is being systematically extracted. Secret 5. They invest in power and influence, not just businesses. In 2012, a small network of billionaires pooled resources to fund a political strategy. The Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, Robert Mercer. Not millions, billions, not to start businesses, to reshape policy, elections, and public opinion. By 2016, they'd changed the political landscape of the United States. Here's the backstory. In 1971, corporate America was losing the culture war. Environmental regulations were increasing, labor unions were strong, public opinion favored taxation of the wealthy. Then a lawyer named Lewis Powell wrote a memo to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce outlining a strategy. Businesses needed to stop being reactive. They needed to fund think tanks, control academia, influence media, and buy political power. That memo became the blueprint for the next 50 years. The details matter. Billionaires don't just donate to candidates. They fund networks, the Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, Americans for Prosperity. These organizations generate research, talking points, and policy proposals that favor deregulation, lower taxes, and weaker labor protections. This research gets cited by politicians, reported by media, and becomes conventional wisdom. You think you're hearing neutral expertise. You're hearing funded advocacy. They also invest directly in media. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News and the Wall Street Journal. These aren't vanity projects. They're influence machines. When you control the narratives people consume, you control what's politically possible. The mechanism works like this. A billionaire funds a think tank to produce a study showing that corporate tax cuts increase jobs. That study gets picked up by media outlets, some of which the billionaire owns or advertises in. Politicians cite the study to justify legislation. The legislation passes. The billionaire saves hundreds of millions in taxes. The return on investment isn't 10%, it's 10,000%. Let's be concrete. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act reduced the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. In the first year, corporations saved more than $100 billion. The lobbying cost to pass that bill was less than $1 billion. For every dollar spent influencing the law, corporations received more than $100 in return. That's not business. That's control of the system itself. The challenge is that ordinary people don't have this leverage. You vote every few years. Billionaires vote with billions of dollars continuously. Your voice is one among millions. Their voice is amplified through every institution that shapes opinion and policy. And here's the plot twist that should terrify you. When you hear debates about economic policy, you're not hearing a neutral marketplace of ideas. You're hearing the outputs of a 50-year investment in shaping those debates. The think tanks, the studies, the experts on TV, many of them are funded by the same networks of billionaires who benefit from the policies they're advocating. You think you're forming your own opinions. You're often repeating their talking points. This is the deepest level of control. It's not just owning businesses or avoiding taxes. It's owning the conversation itself. Deciding what questions get asked, what solutions seem reasonable, what's considered extreme, and what's considered common sense. Conclusion. Let's be clear about what we've just exposed. Billionaires don't work for money. They own the systems that generate it automatically. They don't fear debt. They weaponize it to control more assets with less personal risk. They don't pay taxes like you do. They've structured the entire code to favor asset appreciation over wage income. They don't passively participate in an economy. They control the creation of money itself and ensure they're first in line when new money flows. And they don't just compete in the market. They buy the rules of the game, the referees, and the stadium. These aren't secrets because they're hidden in vaults. They're secrets because the system you were raised in never taught you to look for them. You were taught to optimize your position within their game, not to question the game itself. So what do you do with this? First, understand you can't win, playing by the rules you were taught. Those rules were designed to keep you in place. If you want different results, you need to operate differently. Start thinking like an owner, not an employee. What systems can you build or buy into that generate value independent of your time? What can you control that others need? Learn how to use leverage. The right debt, secured against appreciating assets, is the most powerful accelerant to wealth in existence. Stop fearing it and start understanding it. Understand the tax code or hire someone who does. Structure your income around assets and capital gains, not just salary. Every dollar you save in taxes is a dollar that compounds in your favor. Buy assets, not liabilities disguised as assets. Things that generate cash flow, things that appreciate. Get your money into the same markets where new money flows first. And finally, recognize that this isn't just personal finance. This is structural. Real change requires collective understanding. Share this information. The more people who see the mechanisms, the harder those mechanisms are to maintain invisibly. You've been lied to, not with false statements, but with incomplete education. They told you to work hard and save. They didn't tell you the people getting richest don't do either. They own, They leverage and they control. The question now is what you do with this knowledge. You can go back to optimizing your salary, paying your taxes, and hoping your 401k grows enough to retire on. Or you can start playing a different game entirely. The billionaires already made their choice. They chose to own the system. What will you choose?